Welcome, everybody. Hello, Housing Committee, last meeting of the year.
Okay, yeah.
I'll just call the roll. Byron Meadow, not here.
Given the option.
Eric Pearson here. Megan Corsetti, not here. John O'Leary.
Yeah.
And Andrew Simonis here, and Mary Lowe,
Here.
and Tracy Kozak,
Here.
and Counselor Monroe,
Here.
and from staff,
Oh,
and then here, Mitch. From staff, we have Peter Britz, we have Peter Stiff, and we have Trevor McCork, Legal Department. I'm John Tabor, and our other co-chair, Joanna Kelly, is out of town, so she won't be able to join us tonight. First up, we have approval of the minutes.
got it. Move.
Second. Any changes, comments? Good to go? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We tried to put together for you, 6 slides. What the committee did, it's not overly embellished. It's just the facts. But, welcome comments and edits on it. Thought was we could give this to the council in the packet for the meeting of the 22nd. Any of you would like to speak to it at the council meeting, that would be great too. It's always wonderful when the council hears from the actual citizen committee members themselves, because it's your experience, what it's been in your eyes. So grab me after the meeting.
So we gonna take them in order?
Sure. First is just a little text summary of how the committee got started. Our mission statement. I think we finally finished in this room in May of.
It took us 3 months, yeah.
And second, group these by impact areas. The Sherburne School Project. We went through first the recommendation to recommend to the council that they dispose of the Sherburne property, which the council approved. Then, in August of 24, council asked us for input on Sherburne and criteria for requests for proposals. So we deliberated on that, and all of this is from our minutes, which are all fine.
And the minutes which we already approved, so.
Yes. And then after the summer, the city manager had gotten the process down to 2 finalists. You recall this, the manager's staff had a scoring rubric. And then we developed questions for both the PHA and preservation of affordable housing, the other finalists. There was a discussion of whether that should be an open process, and the city manager decided to make it open process. And then in December 5th of 24, we as the committee met in the council chamber, viewed all the answers. We heard from a lot of public comment. We heard from both the developers, voted to recommend PHA. That came right up to the council 4 days later, and council voted to move forward with PHA and their project. Then we had the city properties, did some site walks in last August. We made our recommendations of Granite Street and the lower lot. Couldn't get anybody to sell us any property to add. So we tried. Condo boards are tough. Something in me wants to go back and talk to that condo board.
Wait 2 years, maybe they'll change their mind.
Right. Yes, condos. boards always need money, so there's always a.
And they also changed membership too.
Right. But then we also had a really good meeting with, Craig Welch and the PHA on their long-range properties and possibilities. And diving back into those minutes, there were a lot of good things that I think we should. The GNOD, early on in our tenure, we started talking about Commerce Way as an area to rezone for mixed use. And actually, Councilor Moreau had been in a planning board meeting when the property owners there had requested that. So that took on a lot of life, and those discussions merged into the Kane McIntyre settlement discussions, and we ended up with concept of really housing friendly, housing first zoning for that area, which would include a gift back of an acre of land, which the city could then dispose of for affordable housing. And we played a role in shaping that, and we also had fleshed out the in lieu payment option. The Housing Trust Fund gave that a new ordinance.
We have a housing trust fund now.
We have a housing trust fund. It even has money in it.
Exactly. Very exciting.
Then we were asked by the council on a motion by Andrew Bagley and Kate Cook to recommend zoning changes. It was spoken of as for the master plan, but I think when we got into it and looked at what we could harvest in that area, many of them we could get done faster than the master plan. So I itemized all of those, and some are still in process. We had that great meeting in October on RSA 79E with Brian Pope. One of the items of business going forward is how to make use of 79E. And then a quick update on the 1% loan fund that the Lighthouse Credit Union has put together a working group that includes major employers like Sig Sauer and Jim Teasel from company, bankers, housing folks from the state, and it's getting some momentum. It's about that. And then I put in the scorecard for 100 units gold. Actually,
Close,
we're close.
shockingly close.
Tech Service Credit Union, not that slowed down, we even closer.
John?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure who put these together, but thank you. I think that you took a couple of years of work and condensed it very nicely into something that's, easily looked at and people can get a feel for what happened. So whoever put it together, thank you very much. I do want to talk a little bit mostly about this particular slide here. I think I'm looking at this and, first of all, as far as definitions are concerned, I'm not sure what the word approval means. Is that's just city approval?
Yes,
So
land use board approval.
the land use board approval, so we don't want to create the illusion that something is ready to go because it's approved. But that's not the case. I think that, we just need to recognize that part of it. The second thing I just want to mention is when we look at Commerce Way, I'm assuming they shouldn't do, that's talking about the Kane settlement property. Where do we stand on that? Have they chosen a piece of property? I mean, everything, we know that there was a settlement, for lack of a better term, where do we stand on that? I'll defer to Trevor because that's the negotiation. That's why he's here.
Not exactly why I came today, but I'm happy to talk about it.
I want to find out why you came today.
So the Kane Company is obliged to provide to the city 1.5 acres of land in the Commerce Way area, the G-Non area, that the city can then use to develop below market rate housing. We are still in negotiations with them about finalizing the exact location of that, but those negotiations are going really well, in my opinion. And I
And that counts.
believe that I believe that'll come to a head very, very soon. That's what I can say.
So there, in a reasonable period of time, we'll be able to have a location. And after that, because you really can't start moving forward until you get a location. So your expectation is that if within a reasonable period of time, that's my word, not yours, the a location will be, decided upon.
Sure, reasonable is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose, but I believe it'll
It's
be
not a term of art.
in relatively short order. We'll have that piece of property and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, good. Thank you. The other question I've got, and I know we have a subject matter expert here at the table, is with regards to the co-living. I've read in the paper that there may be some changes. So is that number still a valid number, the 125?
Councilor.
It's 125 people, not units.
Okay.
That's the part that everybody's really, that every time somebody says it's 125 units, I'm like, no, it's not.
Okay.
We said no more than
You
100,
gotta
and
fix
that's just that one project.
Okay, so the term units up there, it needs to be changed.
Correct. It's 125 people in just one, but then there's also, how many people it's less than 80, isn't it, in the, their building? Come on, Peter,
Which
one of the
part?
Peters will send this number.
Pleasant Street?
Market Square. Oh, yeah, right, you're right here.
That was the subject matter expert I was
Yeah, 14
referencing.
14 where were
I know, I can't remember that one. I know it's less than 80.
8 units,
Yeah.
maximum double
Of
occupancy.
16.
16 people.
8 units,
So-
counting.
And so
So the 125 is what location?
That's the JJ Newbury.
That's Newbury? Okay.
So how many bedroom units with that?
Now that's a harder question to answer.
I
'Cause
don't have,
they're not all guaranteed to be double occupancy, even if they're allowed to be double occupancy, but about half of the units are double occupancy and the other half are not, approximately.
I think we had 80 units total.
I think so.
81.
And that, yeah. I'd have to go back and look at this again, although it's probably
Yeah,
on here, so I can
maybe
probably find it.
So it's just over 80 for the whole building,
Building
Yeah,
and then they got approved for 125 occupants,
occupancy.
max occupancy.
Doesn't mean it will be there, but that's the max it can be.
So 83 units plus the other 8.
Round up to 120.
It's a big rounding, but yeah. But it is that many people, right? Yes.
And my final thing has nothing to do with what we have there, but I'm gonna bring it up because it seems like a good place to bring it up. I was reading in the paper about the plans for Pease and the community college. I would suggest that someone, whether we make a motion and have it go to council or something like that, I think the city needs some representation on that. I mean, right now, we're talking about the school and the PDA and everybody else. At the end of the day, if something happens there, it could be an impact on the city. So I would think that however it's most appropriate to deal with it, that the city should have a seat at the table, whether it be dealing with our legislative delegation to change the makeup of the legislation or whatever. But I think it would be a mistake for us not to be at the table.
How does everybody feel about that? I agree.
Well, isn't the city manager on the PDA?
She is, she's on the board.
So that's our representation. For the city, but not the committee. Are you saying the?
No, yeah, but she's our representation on the PDA, but not on the board they're putting together to oversee this project. So,
It's a legislative committee.
It's right. They're talking the legislative level. You're talking like how it affects the city. So yes, we certainly could have the mayor write a letter regarding Portsmouth's position on any legislative matters. But in the end, any project that would get built there is approved by the PDA board and ultimately gets recommendation from the city planning board as well. So we don't have any power what to tell them to do, but at least we would know the details and know what's coming down the pike. And if they needed to, I think we can require them to help if it's going to be a huge impact to one of our city services, right? Am I wrong, right?
I mean, certainly, I mean,
We, as part of a recommendation in terms of the planning board process.
Right.
but I mean, I just think that that's kind of coming in at the very end of it. I think that it'd be nice to be there throughout the whole process. That's my thought.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, in reference to the last page, I looked at it and I said, you know, we set a number at the beginning of this whole process of 500, and now we've seen and be in some attitude of tallying it up. On the Commerce Way project, you have 80 units. That's not within that project itself. Is that associated with the land that's going to be donated or exchanged
yes.
with the fact that it'll hopefully accommodate 80 units? Is that right?
The
Okay.
settlement statement, I believe, had the minimum of 80
I
units.
just need some clarity on that, you know, and, the service credit, that, I know that application was pulled. So there was no amount of units associated with that project, even though it was pulled?
I can give you what update I do have on this. It was, upper management of Service Credit Union came to the realization that the best way for them to move forward, especially for that land in perpetuity, was to create a nonprofit to actually own the land and manage it moving forward, like as an owner, so that then it's not actually owned by the bank. It'll be owned by the separate nonprofit. So they're in the process of creating that nonprofit entity to own it in order for that to move forward. So that's what made it slow down, which honestly, in the end, is a brilliant idea because they can create this nonprofit in a way that'll ensure it'll be perpetually always affordable, which I thought was a brilliant idea. I wish I'd come up with it.
And I think they also were looking at the how many units and what, and the various rental levels of them.
Right. I mean, they had a lot they were thinking about, and I think slowing it down meant they could really take a master plan. But I mean, we're most likely, my best guess is between 200 and 300 units will probably end up there in some way, shape, or form. I doubt it'll be under 200. I think it'll be right around 200.
But there'll be a mix in there, right? A market rate and.
No, well, that's right. They did a few
They
for
had
sale.
I think they had like 270 unit buildings, and then they had some condos, market rate condos, and then potentially a like military housing,
Veterans.
veterans
We
housing.
don't need the detail on that. It's in
That
the,
was what they had talked about originally when they came before.
and the co-living units, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it being there, but I mean, we still don't have that established as. We don't even know what, we're making some assumptions that there's gonna be some affordability to it, but we don't know exactly the parameters of how that's gonna take place. It's, you know, what the cost is, what that, you know, what do we charge for those units, you know, to say, okay, they are affordable. I'm making an assumption they're gonna be far less than some market.
Right. I mean, if the average
Comparisons, right?
of a single bedroom apartment is what, 2,800?
Right.
Come in, well,
But I don't think it was ever sold as an afford, is if they sold,
I think it's more of a diversity.
developed as that.
It's a diversity investing option.
Yeah, it's,
So those are just questions, you know, how you tally it, can tally it three ways to Sunday, but I mean, you know, it's just, that's the final, um, that's the way it's been tallied. I thought there were some questions that could come out of this.
yeah, I think my takeaway is the Service Credit Union project, the Christchurch project, those are direct results of mixed-use zoning, the gateway zoning. So it's good to see it's working. Co-living, you know, began, I think, as a discussion around the boarding house zoning and how antique that was. And that actually came up second quarter of 24 in this committee. And then it, you know, the developer wanted that to happen, and saw a need, and so that happened. So these, I take that as we have a community after the places to live dialogue and all of the discussion then. Where we see a problem, we know it's an acute problem, and step by step, incrementally, we're tackling it.
Just one more issue is the Lighthouse, the Seacoast housing effort from Lighthouse. What's the prospect of closing the loop on that? And would there be any discussion to use any of the housing trust money to kind of, you know, I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice to know what would, I use close the loop so that this thing, you know, comes to some development that it can, you know, you can take it into action kind of things. And I don't know where that discussion is with Lighthouse right now, but I think it's a good thing that's taking place, but you know, how far out to completion went.
Yeah, Jen Stebbins has been part of that. Her brother is actually part of it too. And I've been in on two of those meetings. I think they'll get something done this year. I think they're looking at raising between 7 and 10 million for Seacoast wide. And they're working with Evernorth. So, you know, I think it's too soon to know what our role would be. It's right now pitched to employers who have this problem of housing their workforce. They're willing to put money in and take a very eager return to have housing created for their workforce.
John, do you know how they identified which businesses that they were going to approach? Like, did they cast a wide net? Did they identify a select group of people?
I don't know. I don't know. But they were looking.
You said Jen is working on that project?
She's been part of our discussions with the local banks.
Okay.
And her brother is part of that working. So it's interesting, you know, that's a totally private sector.
I mean, it has a potential to open up a tremendous amount of doors once this environment actually considered. It's just as important as some of the, you know, brick and mortar units we see it.
So are you comfortable with what you've got to take to the council?
Well, I think we need to fix the co-living unit.
Yeah.
Maybe I make a suggestion that, we sort of put the approved ones and then to come ones and then diversity of housing for the co-living units and put what the occupancy is. Just to sort of, and not really add it up, but just to sort of list out what we have been working on.
Good thought.
Take out the total, reorganize a little bit. I think it works much.
Yeah, then you have a column.
Right.
Yeah.
In the works, so to speak, would be, you know, Service Credit Union, Commerce Way. Those are, you know, Yeah, those would be the
Pending.
pending in talks, in process, but not board approved.
And with respect to co-living, it is the creation of more housing units, which I think does fall under this committee's mission statement, if you will. So to that end, we could talk about ADUs as well, and maybe just, it would be good to benchmark permitted ADUs or ADUs in process. And I think if we are talking about co-living, of which we do not know the rates for, we also don't know that about ADUs. So I guess they are apples to apples in this sense because it's creation of a new housing unit, which again is kind of our thesis here. So it's also a really important metric because we've done so much work on the ADU side to include that and recognize if that's a material change or a material improvement from where we stood.
Excellent thought.
That's a good idea.
Excellent.
It's the addition to the page.
Yeah, because that's land use committee. We worked the ADU ordinances to make it simpler and they're perking along.
I start crying because now the state's just made they go away. So
Yeah.
after those 2 years we spent on it.
So it's changing again.
Because
Let's add a line.
And I think it's really important, not only for this current committee or the current council, but in the future to be able to use real quantifiable metrics and see what the response was to those units. So if we only get 100 some odd co-living units and no one ever does another project again, well, that's pretty indicative of that certain response. Same applies for the ADU,
Yeah.
where if we have changed all of these rules to be more accommodating, but we get 0 applications, well, still yet there's probably an issue there. So it's really, I think it's more of a reactionary metric, but it's still very important to have in our pocket.
I should probably mention, with the co-living, we are in the process of going through TAC to change the 14 Market back to apartments. Because, it was approved as co-living for 8 units, but there's a requirement to provide 24/7, 365 day a year on-site management, which is equivalent of 3 full-time employees, and for 8 bedrooms,
not working.
we're upside down.
Yeah.
So it's really a matter of scale to make the co-living work. It has to be done with a lot.
Scale.
It's that requirement for the,
And until we actually have
Staff.
one up and running, we don't know if it's gonna be this
Yeah.
meeting.
so just a FYI that, the smaller co-livings are not really.
So don't count those. Just do 125 occupancy.
Different story on the bigger ones.
Yeah, and I think we're all fascinated to see how that experiment works. There's certainly a need for people who work downtown. So, anything else on that?
Thank you again.
And as I say, if any of you would like to, at the top of the meeting, so you don't have to stay the next council meeting, or even in January.
Oh, the next meeting's gonna be we listen to holiday music.
That's true. Wait, we get the jingle bell.
I can wear my Santa hat.
If I can, if the committee would like, 2 of those items, pertain to BHA. I wanted to, Craig wanted to chime in on any of them.
Well, I think we'll get good chance, but yeah, sure.
I mean, I'm just asking,
Any comments that you had on this before we tee up? Sure.
On this unit count?
Yeah.
The affordable, the tax credit finance, the permanently affordable housing is super constrained. Just because of the number of tax credits that there are. So I think this is measurably really terrific for the city to be doing this. And then also I think it's terrific to be doing this on the any rent controlled or anything part of the CFP that is done on the backs of developers that are awesome. And it doesn't look like up here is any of the ADUs. And I think the work that you've done on ADUs is really outstanding. I think that's a great solution for any housing. not just socially and between families, but so I think your work is excellent there and probably not shows up on this number.
And we're still working on the incentives for inclusionary zoning, to get it developed to include 10%.
Well, that's one of the things, the fact that we became the housing champion community and got that additional grant should probably be part of the
Yeah.
report as well.
Yes. I just mentioned it in a few words, but I should flesh that out.
Something to be proud of.
Yeah, that was a poodle.
Next item.
Next slide.
Council refers, planning motion.
Yes. So we had all those potential zoning changes.
Right, and you made a slide for that, so thank you. So the recommendations that you all sent to city council, they referred to the planning board. Planning board took them up. And they preferred the rezoning of gateway parcels to the city council. They actually added a parcel
We did. That's right.
behind Walmart connected.
It's closer to Perry.
Right. That's gonna move forward in January to city council. Staff is still working on, the planning board's in support of moving parking out of zoning and putting in site plan regulations, and staff is working on that. But the conversion of dwellings to multifamily dwellings, the planning board thought that should be vetted through the master plan process because it could drastically change some areas, some neighborhoods. And then 7, 8, 9E, I think that is that legal?
City council needs to put together a work session on that because that was one of the things that we had talked about doing after the election. We just haven't quite got there yet. So we'll put that on the list of things that we need to request.
Because we referred to legal said, well, you've got to give us more.
Narrow
specific.
it down.
Where in the city do you want some of these zones? Which zones and which don't you want? Potentially.
So I think what we just need to get on the council work session
Yeah.
schedule and start working on that.
And then ADUs, there's a recent state law change for ADUs and for parking. We can't require more than one parking space per dwelling. So, right now, the most we require is 1.3, so that's gonna have to come down to 1. And then we had to make some significant changes to the ADU section because now it's basically treated like a single family dwelling. It's by right, it no longer requires a conditional use permit. We can still require 1 parking space and that'd be owner occupied. So those amendments are gonna come to council in January as well. Good.
They've already gone through planning board.
Yeah.
When do you think the parking into site review come to the planning, to the council?
Well, I guess it'll have to go to the planning board first.
Okay, that's right.
Planning board hasn't seen it yet.
Right.
It's still being drafted.
It's kind of complex because there's a lot of references throughout the ordinance that we define. And then we have to organize it into the site plan ready format. So it's,
It's a two-step process.
yeah.
Okay. Great. Questions for Peter on that? For our planning board members? When it comes back to the council from the planning board, it's got a very strong chance of success. Considering the top 2 grants.
So we have the consultant RKG and they've coordinated with resilience planning and design to look at the zoning ordinance. And they've sent us some draft amendments for the sections in the zoning ordinance that require workforce housing. We're trying to set up a call with them next week to discuss that. So the plan is when we finalize that RKG would come back and do another public meeting where they explain it and all that out. And would bring it to council for referral to the planning board.
And as you guys recall, they they did an economic analysis of our incentives, and they said, this isn't worth it for.
They blew it up.
And I think they spoke then, and it makes sense of requiring fewer units. Requiring only 10, what was it?
Well, it was a percentage of the
Incremental.
overage, the additional units that you're gonna get, you would take 10% of those units for your, instead of all the units.
Right.
And looking at it, it's gonna have to take a lot to get some, small number of units, so.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's where we want it right now, so we're gonna talk to them.
Not gonna work the way it was intended.
Yeah. And we've actually had some success in projects like the tour. Cinematic.
West End.
What's the next?
New York.
Negotiated.
Have a little bit of success.
Well, that just tells us what we need to prioritize. I mean, that's data that comes back and says this is not the thing to focus all of your energy. It should be a tool in our toolbox, but it's not going to be the main vessel we use to get to it.
Right.
And we're probably gonna have an uphill battle with the state to try to get them to mandate anything, so.
Oh, yes, we will.
Yeah, I know. All our neighboring states are able to mandate a percentage of affordable units, but that's not the New Hampshire way.
No, but it's also good information to be out in the public sphere, because if there's enough momentum behind it to put pressure on the state, maybe the change will happen.
So one more thing, I guess, the other state law that was passed requires residential to be allowed in commercial zones that don't allow residential currently, but have infrastructure to support it. That goes into effect, I think, July 2026. So we'll be working on amendments. We have some zones that only allow for office research and business or general business.
I still want to get rid of all of them.
Right.
I think we,
That way.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think it'd be easier just to try to clean up and get rid of some of those versus trying to change them.
Right.
Yeah. We have
Let's
20.
simplify ours.
But there's still some changes that have to be made with what they recommended, because as you know.
Was that 614 or 644 RSA?
I
Something.
don't know. I can't remember the number.
Yeah, I've read it.
But that significantly impacts Newington because they don't allow any.
Oh, they're not happy.
And they- Right.
What will they ever do?
In fact, they are making the claim that the entire state did this because of that alone.
But it's contingent on infrastructure, right?
Right, you have to support it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Which there is infrastructure. There is infrastructure there for.
Absolutely.
Yes. It's our sewer, water, and services.
Yeah. They have sewer and water because of us.
Should cut it.
We kind of can't because our water kind of comes right across their whole entire town. A lot of it does.
Some of those big users are pay a lot of the funding of the water department. Well, we'll just have to see how that one plays out. Have we had any preliminary inquiries from private developers?
No.
Questions on that? No. Thanks for the summary.
Thank you.
And on to Craig Welch. A number of you wanted to hear from Craig about the Sherburne project. Questions? We deferred in October, we deferred in November because we didn't know the status of the housing tax credits. So,
Thank you. Are these windows broken or are they open?
They're historic, don't they?
Things are,
Yeah.
look like they're
I
open.
think they're original.
Yeah.
That's why it sounds like a wind tunnel.
Yeah, fold in them.
Thank you for having us. Craig Welch, the Director of the Housing Authority, my colleague Andrea, Andrea, the Director of Outreach Engagement, specifically when we were ramping up with the Shermer project, an outstanding addition to our team and for all these applications and all the outreach. Has done a great job. And again, I'm not sucking up, but I really think this committee has done some great work. Just really having the kind of expertise that you have, and actually taking action on things, everything from the zoning to actually getting shovels in the ground and all the ADU work. It's really, I think that you guys have all asked great questions and done great stuff. So kudos to you all. So thank you for inviting us. We're still focused on advancing all aspects of this project. The Sherburne project was reviewed for its scoring by the multifamily working group at New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. And on November 13th, they called us and said that we are one of the recommended recipients for the 2026 tax credits. That's a huge win for the city. Thank you. Huge win for the city and really a credit to the leadership of the council for putting yourselves out there and making this a priority, and putting up this land. One of the biggest scoring categories there is land donation. So arguably, I'd like to take credit for the winning this, but it's really the city council doing that was what brought us over the line. So the staff recommendation is followed up by a board vote with New Hampshire Housing. So that'll take place next week. But the applications are reviewed is quantitative, not qualitative. So there's no precedent over the board not approving this. So we expect to be approved next week. It is the purview of the board. Expect to be approved next week for tax credit allocation between the 9% tax credits and 4% tax credits. That'll bring another $15 million in equity into the housing infrastructure in Portsmouth. So we're really proud of that, and thanks for all your work on that. It's also a significant milestone for the PHA to go 3 for 3 with these applications in the short time that we've been doing this. We feel really proud of that. With this now in place, the financing stack becomes more predictable. The partners' confidence increases, and the project is now tracking as expected. We're continuing to update the sort of sequence that goes along from here. Despite this success, we are continuing to battle against some really strong headwinds. Since the new administration took office in January of this year, we've experienced a lot of erratic and conflicting policy changes at the federal level. The tariffs on construction materials have increased costs, and the financial institutions have found it really difficult to manage risk. That's resulted in some volatility there. We're also, as you might know, seeking an additional source of funds for another $500,000 in unanticipated costs for off-site water and sewer upgrades that were found when we did the flow tests. Infrastructure is a big deal, and there's limited capacity in some manholes that are about a quarter of a mile away on Borthwick Avenue that will need to be updated and is adding to the cost. On the state level, despite the housing crisis that we have, and 2 UNH polls that have come out that have stated that housing is the #1 concern by people in New Hampshire, the state only funded the statutory minimum to the State Housing Trust Fund, which is $5 million. Despite the request for $30 million to that fund, that's, statewide $5 million is nothing, and even the $30 million falls far short. Some of the other funding sources that we're pursuing is the Invest New Hampshire 2.0. That was a state residual money left over from COVID when the state had $100 million to distribute, and they only have about 7 million now left, and they've had 40 some odd applications for that. 7 million. Those awards will be announced later this month, is what we've been told. The mayor has provided some excellent advocacy for us, and as well as Executive Councilor Janet Stevens is strongly advocating for the project to be funded. The Community Development Finance Authority tax credits is not new news, but I always like to take an opportunity to mention it because it's a great way for businesses to participate in funding these projects. So any business in Bruce Place, we had 31 different businesses step up, including Great Oak we mentioned before, and Procon, Jen on this committee, and we still are raising about another $200,000 in 2026, and then we also have an allocation. So we're be delighted to take any referrals or introductions you have to businesses that might participate in that, from $1,000, or we have a couple of $100,000, and anything in between. The PHA, we're also looking for like some high impact investors and some other different sources. As of November, the end of November, PHA has expended $530,000 in design and permitting and all the reports and studies and consultants. That does not include the hundreds and hundreds of hours by PHA staff since this concept commenced in 2022. And aside for what the PHA has put at risk to date, we do expect and have the board authorized to invest millions more to complete this project. And worth noting that all of this has been done at no cost to city taxpayers. It's been funded entirely by the PHA. We're continuing to coordinate with city staff with regular updates and with all the customary due diligence and design that's required with any development project of this size. When the tax credit awards are finalized, and we'll need some increased coordination with DPW and legal and community development, planning and other departments after the start of the new year. The project design and phasing, as we've discussed before, the financial constraints have forced us to split the whole development into two projects. We've got 127 units that have been permitted here, and but the first phase of that being a 90-unit development that will happen in first, and that's what we've got. That's what we've got the tax credit award for, and that's what we're moving towards construction. And subsequently, we'll be pursuing to a next phase that includes the school and the area around the school itself. The reason for starting with this first 90-unit phase is to achieve the policy goals that the city has set out for us to build the maximum amount of units in the shortest amount of time. So that's why we pursued that, and that's why we've also gone for 127 units, which we think is a responsible number of units for this site. I think a private developer might get more, or ask for more, but I think we've done a good job at doing something reasonable here. This first phase will be 75 one-bedrooms, 25 two-bedrooms, and 11 three-bedroom units overall. I'm sorry, 8 three-bedroom units overall. And also the right after the new year, we'll also have some, we'll start on the design of phase 2. In fact, this site plan is really what phase 1 will look like. Be a driveway around the center, and the orange building is the 90-unit building that will be constructed. If I could see the next slide. This is what it looks like fully built out. The current plan that has been designed and approved by TAC and Planning Board is this. There's a 90-unit building in back. A portion of the school building remains. So the front facade remains. The back part of the school comes off, and there's a 29-unit, 3-story building that's built in back of the school. But after the first of the year, we are starting a design process for the school, and we really feel like it's important to come up with another design option that would include preserving the whole school, less the gym cafeteria space in the middle. And as we've studied the project and learned more, despite some additional expense that we think goes along with Sturbridge School, I think that it is the right thing to do for Portsmouth, and I think it could be a really, really cool project. We might end up in that scenario sacrificing a few of these units that we've got. The building is a 17,000 square foot footprint. That's only one story, although when you've crawled up in that attic, as we have, the attic is really huge up there. And so we even think there's some potential for 2 stories in the building and partially, part of an addition that would attach to it. My preference to go for a new kind of plan there. So we'll be doing that. Andrea has been speaking with the City Arts and Cultural Commission. They advocated really early in this process to do something that's in big demand, is like artist live workspace, and we fully endorse and support that idea, and we'll have that at top of mind when we redesign the Sherburne School. We think that that'd be a really awesome thing to do with the city, and Andrea said is communicated with that commission, and we'll try to push that forward after the new year. And I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah, we could look through a couple of those too. I mean, that's a rendering of how it would look like as permitted with the 3-story building in between. And showed you the 2 site plans. We don't have a site plan for what it would do, and I can't recall what's on the next slide here. That's a floor plan there of just one of the stories with the 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms included. This is just a quick rendering of the community space that will be in on the first floor. We per square foot, big community spaces is not something that is economically, part of that. It's we don't get paid rent for that space, but we do want some of that space. So there is a community room here, be a very small office, of course, needs space for mailboxes and package delivery and vending, and a common bathroom. But we made that office really, really small. We don't have any exercise facilities in any of our properties right now, but our intention here is to have a small gym that would be for use of the residents there as well. And I think that's important. We've also designed that into the Christchurch project as well, but on the 4th floor. So that'll be pretty. This is a timeline. Most of this at the beginning is what we've done thus far. And this doesn't include all of the technical pieces, all of our other like financing and everything milestones, but just an example of the things we've done with the city between June of 2022 and today, although today is the 11th, not the 12th. So happens when you drag something in an Excel sheet. So forgive me. So it's been 2.5 years of work since this initial concept and our initial discussion with the city about moving this forward. These things take a long time. They always do. There's still a lot ahead of us, and there's still a lot of risks and challenges as always. And just for reference, this is just a rendering of the school as is. We've done a complete structural analysis. Is a very, very solid building. If you can see, like, tearing down those back 2 wings is, economically, you'd see why that would open up a lot of real estate to put a bigger, another building back there. But we think with some, smaller units, and doing something that is minimally viable, um, construction, I think can still be really terrific and preserve a lot of the things without like completely gutting the building. We think there's a minimally viable solution to save the school in a fashion that would be able to be built using these tax credits and the financing that's available. So, happy to answer any questions people have about the process or at all.
Steve, so John.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you very much for being here and congratulations on where you are right now. I know it's not a done deal, but you're very confident. So I think one of the things that I'm concerned about, what I've heard, is that this whole phasing thing has created some consternation with regards to how the project that was originally presented goes forward. I think that, we all know that sometimes we look at a project and we cost it out based on the entire project. And then when we start looking at individual components of it, the cost structure is a little bit different. So what I see here, give you my perspective, is that you're looking to do the more, I'll use the term cost-effective portion of this project, the one where you get the most units for the money spent. I mean, I think that's a fair representation. So the concern is that once you get that done, what happens to the school? And I appreciate the comments that you've made tonight. I think that I use the analogy at one of our earlier meetings when I was younger. They told me that you always paint the back of the building first, because if you start at the front, the back may never get painted. So here I'm a little concerned. The fact is that once you get your 90 units, one, that it stops at that point in time. Or secondly, you say, well, now it's not cost effective to do the school. So either we're going to demolish it and then use the land to build another building, or if the city really wants to keep the school, the city's going to have to belly up to come up to the table with some real money. So those are the concerns, and I just appreciate it if you address those concerns.
All those scenarios are possible, to be straightforward. And this is what, and for real estate professionals here, that often happens. You have to pivot depending on market conditions and funding available and lots of different things. So our goal, our intent is to fulfill our obligations to the city. We have an option agreement through December 2027. If we don't have a project, that's moving forward by then, and the city chooses, decides that this is not the right place for housing, or this is not the right project for the PHA, then have the opportunity to put that together. But right now we have an option 2020.
So you get 2 years.
Yeah.
And has that 2 years just to have a project in the ground, or completed?
In the ground,
Okay.
I trust that, the city, we would prefer an option till 2030. Of course, because you're always trying to manage risk, but, understand the city's trying to, manage risk as well. And so we've had a lot of conversations, negotiating this option agreement, and we agreed to that. I think that if we had a project that was moving forward and that the city would be unreasonable extending that for purposes of getting something done, I hope that would be the case. If we're stuck, or if we're not doing anything and there needs to be somebody else to take a shot at that, then we would accept that as well. But we'll have, $1 million of our own money into this by then. Yeah.
And I think that, I appreciate your honesty with regards to this. I think that, the fact is that this was sold to the community, especially to the people at Panaway, that they were gonna maintain the school. That was one of the things. And if that's changing, you know, in the interest of transparency, we need to make people aware of it. Maybe nothing they can do about it. But again, transparency is an important aspect that we're dealing with here. And I think the other thing too is, and again, you brought it up, I had a little note here. I've heard the grapevine that you'd be coming back to the city for additional funds to help with the water hookup. Is that, I mean, it's kind of interesting, you know, when I got involved in this, it was presented to me that this would be the city presenting, you know, providing land, and that would be the city's, you know, stake in the process. And you use the term, you know, going forward, that you've done a lot of things at no cost to the city taxpayers. You know, the cost of the land was a given. I mean, we're gonna give the land. I think we just need to be straightforward with regards to other expenses that the city may be, you know, maybe liable for. And I think, you know, for instance, you know, the waiving of the fees, that was something that came off after the fact. That wasn't part of the original proposal. If that had been part of the original proposal, then people would have been aware of it. But the question is, what other things were not part of the original proposal that may come up? So, again, I appreciate your honesty saying that all these scenarios that I presented are possibilities. But let's put it this way. I hope none of them come to fruition.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just say something, especially on the phasing, which has been a point of discussion and confusion in this committee? Page 22 of PHA's RFP includes an entire section about phasing. They were always forthcoming about that being a possibility. They were always forthcoming about the potential that the school might disappear. Things come along that are unexpected, but I think we have an obligation as a committee to try to set the record straight and right. And this notion that people were potentially trying to pull the wool over our eyes, I just want to reject that and say that it's our duty as a committee to read the reports that we request. And in that report that we requested, I mean, I'm speaking on your behalf here, but you were very candid about the fact that this phasing was probably the most likely scenario if we wanted to reach the maximum amount of units.
Andrew. You mentioned at the top of your conversation about the changes in federal funding, and we all know how that's extremely volatile. But now, as you get preliminary approval, if you will, or they voted to start to recognize your project, how much can that change in the duration of your project timeline? And how does your organization brace for impact, if you will, to accommodate changes in funding or timelines of that funding? And how much of that leaves you exposed for whether it's phase one or phase two? I don't care, but how much of that is exposed to those funds?
I can't give you an exact number, but real estate, as you know, is really high risk. Doing development, everybody sees people making a lot of money in real estate, but they don't often see people going bankrupt with real estate because things do.
And all of this earmarked by none of it is in your control.
Right. So with the tax credits, one piece is that the tax credits need to be sold to an investor. Now, those investors are almost always big banks because they have something called Community Reinvestment Act credits, where they are actually required by federal law to invest, not just lend to wealthy customers that they have to spread that around. This is a good opportunity for people to get CRA credits, and so banks are interested in that, or big syndicators, but they're going to pay a certain price. So one big fluctuation could be the price of those credits, and we won't know that right now. We did very well at Ruth's Place, and we've done better than market at at Christchurch with TD Bank. I'm sorry, not TD Bank, M&T Bank is the investor there. But it's a pretty sophisticated investment, so there's not a lot of people doing it. Sometimes the market price for that is 80 cents on the dollar. And it's been a long time since it's been 95 cents on the dollar. So that could fluctuate as well. I talked to some people, depending on their persuasions, some people think the banks are all going to fail in the next year. And that would be a problem for,
Easy statement.
yeah, that would be a problem for all of us. So, yeah, so there could be scenarios. On the other hand, interest rates could fall. The changes in corporate tax rates or whatever could make the tax credits more valuable. All those things could definitely work in our favor as well. In fact, the material price increases, what we found in our Christchurch project, which we hope to break ground on Q1 of next year, is that there's a lot of eager contractors out there for projects of this size. So we actually had great coverage. We're using Bennett Page and Stone contractors out at Christchurch, and had great coverage. I think electrical contractors, they had 11 bids come in, and so there is some positive, not positive for the companies, but some positive pressure on the labor markets that could work in our favor or might not. And so we'll just try to manage that. We have one big, Ernie Carrier is a big contractor, well known to the city, and he's on our limited board, and so he's got a good pulse of what's going on around New England, and there's several projects around New England that have just stopped. They're just paused because there's uncertainty in it. So, but we'll keep, we keep pushing forward. We're always looking for sources. We won't have a guaranteed maximum price. I think it's about a $35 million project is what we're looking at for phase one. But we won't have that guaranteed maximum price until all the bidding is done and we sign a construction contract when we get closer to closing. And that'll depend on the bids. It'll depend on what is happening in the markets at that time. So, and for instance, the banks right now are asking for a 10% construction contingency. That's about double than what they've done in the past. So, and that's really pricing in or a factor of the market volatility more than anything. And so we have to be carrying that in our sources and uses. On the other hand, if we don't need that contingency, then we'll be able to add some of the things back that we're, likely to cut. That's what ends up happening is, we design what we want to build is a $13.7 million building. But we cut that back through value engineering into a $13 million building because that's what we have the finances to do. But at the same time, we still want to build that $13.7 million building. So we're always looking for things like fee waivers or different, more favorable loans from high impact investors or other different sources. When you're paying $50,000 a month on a construction loan, a different source of construction financing from a charitable organization or a high impact investor, something like that, is really meaningful money. And so we're constantly doing that. A lot of the solar money and energy money, New Hampshire overnight had $43 million coming to New Hampshire through the Solar for All program that was just canceled overnight by the Trump administration. So that's made that part of the project. We've actually taken that out of the what we're carrying in the contracted price, and it's another thing that we hope is paid for by others. Because we can't move forward with a certain price. We're I can't remember how many kilowatt system, but it's about a $500,000 solar array to cover that whole roof. But it's, whether or not we'll be able to carry that in the construction. Is something, and when you have a $500,000 solar array, but you have $500,000 in offsite sewer costs, then that's something we'd like to get paid for by others and or piece it together with loans as a state revolving, the DES revolving loan fund could come into play. And so whether it's loans or more favorable financing or just additional grants, our goal is to not, from it's been pretty clear to us from the city council that they don't want any capital improvement fund money going into this project. There's some other ways the city could participate by loan guarantees or just in other ways that could be helpful other than cash contribution. So that's been pretty clear, but I reserve the right to ask. And then that will be the purview of the council at the time. And the purview of the committee. I think it's planning and DPW would be the ones that are in charge of putting the capital improvement plan together. And then there's question about whether or not this would even qualify for something like that. So, but it's been clear by the city council that there's no interest in wasting when you're trying to the water line coming from Madbury and building a police station. There's a lot of demands on that kind of money. So try to fund it with other sources.
Aaron?
Yeah, a couple of questions, but I'll start off. You didn't mention from a funding perspective, but the application for the historical status of that school, which would open up some funding possibilities.
Yeah.
Has that been fully investigated?
We did do a historic review of the property. It is as expected. It's eligible. One of the first things you do is a determination of eligibility. And that's something that actually goes in with our tax credit application. And so as expected, the building is eligible to be on the National Register. And there's a lot of Easter is eligible to be on the National Register, given its age now. And so therefore, it could open the opportunity to use historic tax credits. If you're using historic tax credits, you're dealing with the federal Department of Interior. And it would really limit our ability to do something like add an addition or develop the second story of the building. If you put a second story up there, you might want to dormer the front of it or something in a really tasteful, do an excellent design with that. But anything that would tinker with the building itself, inside and outside, would be subject to the Department of Interior. And based upon the 20 years of experience we have with the McIntyre building, not an easy thing to do. But that could be available to us. I've talked to some private developers who have used historic tax credits in the past with some success, but some people have really strongly advised against going that direction at all.
So currently you're not looking for any type of funding from that source.
We could, yeah, we could. That could be an option, but we'd weigh that, with the lack of flexibility that'll come along.
I see that the Christchurch project, I thought a while ago was kind of off the shelf. Maybe now it appears that, is that a fully funded project, or is that going to be something that you're going to be looking for tax credits in?
No, that has been funded. So that got a tax credit allocation. We were really delayed a lot with the title issue there. Now we're in a phase where it's all coming together. There's a lot of complexity with that one. And could be with here too, depending on how we're gonna sort of separate the two projects. How do you bond two things at the same time? When they're really one project is some complexity that we've talked to the city about it. You know, in Christchurch, there's actually 4 separate condo units that will be delivered to each user in a leasehold deed. There's also a land lease similar to this that's underneath that. You know, so there's and so there's a lot. We don't have any federal funding sources in the 44 units of workforce housing. Haven does have federal funding sources for what they're doing. Federal funding sources come with all kinds of constraints. The Build America, Buy America Act, those set of regulations and how that gets bid and stuff is difficult to separate and cost allocate. So all of these, you know, every term we like to ask people, you know, to keep it simple and not have deep constraints, not have things like that over the long term, to provide the maximum flexibility because these things get really complicated in the end.
Other question?
I don't want to dominate the conversation, but, so, you know, pending that you're gonna be knowing fairly well soon of funding for the first phase.
Yeah.
Are you I would imagine that you're gonna be relatively aggressive to try and fund the second phase?
Yes. Yeah.
For next year?
For next year.
For next year. And I just want to look at this, the illustration. You said there could be a major redesign for the school.
Mm-hmm.
And just from a color perspective, I know the 2 units are in orange, but you know, with the school being still gray, that's not been finalized in this, right?
Now, this is what we.
Or is it two-phase project or potentially a 3-phase project?
I see it as a 2-phase project as what, unless something changes. But this design, you know, that middle building there is a 3-story walk-up wood frame building. I work for a nonprofit, and this has to be. We have to get done, but it's got to be more fun than that and more interesting than that if we're going to do this kind of work. And I just think restoring the school, I think that accomplishes something by adding units. I mean, that's a huge, we're in a crisis. We're 5 million housing units short in this country. We've got a long way to go, but I think there's also a benefit, especially in Portsmouth, for trying to save that whole school and not demolish the whole back half of it in order to do that. And I think if we can strike a balance between both, we will really accomplish something.
You know, I've been initially involved in this because of the status of the school and knowing what you've told us right now that you're gonna, you know, try and acquire funding next year in your application, but that still puts that school 4 years out, maybe 4 years out, something like that for any potential development.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what's that school going to be like in 4 years if it doesn't have any type of maintenance plan?
Yeah, we still don't have a funding source for that right now. But
The maintenance, is that what you mean?
yeah. I mean, it's you know, the whole thing can get shut down. It's actually being used a lot right now as storage for the city. If you ever wonder where Halloween things go or wreaths or snow plows or stuff, it's being used, but the whole thing can be decommissioned and stay as is. And we want to keep it watertight. Once we sign the ground lease, once we close on the back 90 units, then that building is under our control and our responsibility. And so what we would, I think, said before, would be really nice to get the front facade all repaired and painted. We'll apply again for an L-chip grant specifically for the cupola. Just to do an analysis on the cupola is going to be tens of thousands of dollars for just the analysis and design. So that'll be a really expensive project to get that done all the way right. But in the end, you've got to do that all the way right. I mean, whether or not we demolish the back half of the building or not, I think we really want to preserve that cupola, just like we preserved the North Church steeple. I think there's a lot of value to that. Economically, you would take it down. They're expensive to maintain, expensive to build. You know, if this was entirely cost, you would take that down.
I've heard figures up to 50,000 to restore them, right?
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
yeah, even the evaluation I'm told could be close to that. But we've only talked to one outfit about that, and we haven't. We've done some initial work up there. Didn't want to crawl all the way up on the inside, based upon how that ladder is constructed and stuff. We would do that when we did a full investigation.
Chair, if I could just jump in for a second, Greg, thank you. I just want, on the maintenance of the building, I just want to chime in a little bit on that. That is presently still the responsibility of the city for this winter to maintain that building. A ground lease has not been executed at such a time as a ground lease would be executed. It would be very important to the city that there are spelled out maintenance responsibilities so that we've discussed at significant length between the PHA and the city. Because ultimately, as Craig has indicated, you know, and as we've seen, we can't control the market. We don't know what the market's going to do. We all hope and believe that PHA will be able to develop that in short order. But it's certainly nothing's guaranteed. And if the school were to be turned back over to the city, of course, the city would want, you know, that to be in a good condition that we could then go and pursue whatever else we would want to pursue with that structure. So certainly that's something right in the heart of where we've been looking. Documents.
Thank you.
Once you secured funding, which you think is coming in short order, how far would the final ground lease be arranged between the city and PHA? Because right now it's an option, right? It's an option.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we've talked about this. We'd have a closing, where we close on all these documents pretty much simultaneously.
Yeah.
What, for final ground lease?
The final ground, after approval by the city council. City council has to approve the ground lease, give authority to the city manager to execute the ground lease. Subsequent to that, we would have at such time as financing is going to be closed, we'd have one closing where there'd be, all the financing would be secured, the ground lease would be executed by all parties, and you know, from a practical perspective, would be off to the races.
You pass it over to them.
Correct.
For all responsibility.
Yeah, correct.
City will still own it.
Yep.
But the responsibility falls.
It's a long journey.
But it's watertight. I mean, it's very solid. It's a watertight building. Some of the trim elements and stuff in the back side of the building.
The more airtight.
Yeah,
say-
tight. Yeah, for sure.
Sounds like a hurricane.
So, but the city has insisted that there's a plan. There'll be a plan. A plan in place to exactly what's going to happen on an ongoing basis, and do whatever we can to keep it buttoned up.
When would you might think you put a shovel in the ground for the back end? Everything is, you know, as you described to me.
Yeah, I mean, we would, if we can get this going this summer, that'd be lightning fast, then try to get the other part funded and moving about the same time the following year, you know, and have the whole thing placed in service and occupied by the end of 2028. Second phase, you know, there'll be some complexity with the construction and the restoration of that. But all of the infrastructure will already be in place. The back building will need to carry all of the cost for the water and the sewer and the parking. We might not build all of the parking right away. But everything else is going to be in there, the sidewalks, all the power, all the stormwater will already be in place.
Last one or two questions? Go for it.
Mentioned 35 million. That's total project, right?
That's just for the first part of it.
Just for the first part.
Yeah.
Not the front, not the second phase.
Right.
But it includes the infrastructure,
Right.
which is sometimes largest piece of
And all the site work.
the site work and infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at site work, at 3.5 acre Christchurch at 2 million. or something. Out of a 13 million.
Thank you very much.
Adrian? Great,
Thank you for inviting us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're really happy to be, in partnership with the city. This is, looking forward to success and having a great story to tell.
You too. Thank you. Well, we wrap up, just the future discussion, well, Blue Ribbon Committee, which means that we were appointed by the mayor for the term's ending. I know talking Joanna, she and I both would like to see this continue and it's the means that don't go away. But it would be helpful, I think, for Joanna and me, if you could let us know if the housing committee continues. Do you want to step back at this point after having given us great service, or are you interested in continuing? I think it's a great group, a great cross section. A lot of wonderful backgrounds. I'd like to see everybody continue, but let the co-chairs know. And when the council gets together and does their strategic retreat, I'm sure that we're going to talk about housing a lot. Educate and what we've learned and improve it. Welcome your thoughts. Thank you all for good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
So, Joanna, a lot of person. There's no fiercer advocate for housing in this city. Except for Bethany. Public comment? Public comment?
The ratings are going down again.
There's nobody else.
Yes.
Hey, Jaren. Let's go.
My stuff is a lot of questions and I was, the purpose of coming was to, listen to what Craig had to say, because I had some questions, based on the ground. So the first thing I'd like to ask is, you don't have it in front of you, but, section 2.4 is a timetable for financing submissions. And obviously we heard tonight, one or two of them. The second one, this is number 2.5, reports to the city. PHA shall provide monthly reports on on its status. I would ask that, all of these reports be provided to this committee or put on the city website. I went on today and looked and I don't see any of this stuff. So I think it would be valuable information, if you had an idea of where PHA was on their financing, that we got the update tonight. Also, the other thing here was milestones, and we don't really have an idea of what your milestones are. Obviously, the financing comes first, but on a lot of this, there's a lot of leeway here. So as a resident, and I'm hoping the committee has the same feeling, that it would be great to get updates or have it posted somewhere so we know where you are in the process and where the milestones will be coming in and when we actually will have a start date. Basically, in listening tonight, I was kind of surprised at changes that are going on, because as it was presented, we knew it was going to be phased, but the phases that were presented previously, and I understand why you're looking at change, but I really don't recall anything that said you would be adding another story on top in the front of the three-story building. So I'm very interested to see the plans on that, and I would hope that all of that would go on the website and presented to this committee, so the taxpayers have an idea. And per John's comment on this is not costing any taxpayer money. We have revenue for bond on fees for the land use committees and for the building. And if anything comes to fruition about this sewer fee, that is also taxpayer dollars. So that statement was kind of questionable in my mind. I do hope that if there is a new plan, it would get to you as soon as possible. Because we're looking at something different, and so is everybody else, and the notification would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question? As far as their project is concerned, and, I just try to get an answer for you. Any changes that they make to their project, they don't come back to us.
I was just gonna ask. Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'd like to answer, I think all the questions that Peter just asked, because they're really good questions. And so some of this is, let me take a step back. The city is, Bob, one of the things Bob used to like to say to me is that the city is a bureaucracy, and typical of bureaucracies, we work really well when we do the same thing kind of over and over and over again. And one of the things that we don't do over and over and over again is develop residential housing. This is really a one-off. And Craig and his team have been very patient with us, with me, as we've tried to navigate this. I mean, you've heard him say a lot of stuff that, is well outside of our real wheelhouse, and they've been a good partner on that. Part of it, too, has been navigating all these different requirements that Petra has very aptly identified, that we've had to go back and forth on. Okay, let's update the financing schedule, because they're trying to get a project approved, and we're asking for all these updates, and it's not really a part of what they do either, right? Is provide all these updates to the city. So we've been trying to get these updates, we get them, and we say, oh, great, we have the update. And we didn't do the extra step, and for that I apologize. Okay, let's put that on the website. I know Eric has come to me in the past and said, hey, where's this document? Where's that document? And I say, oh, that should be on the website. So we put it up on the website. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. We have these documents. We can put them up on the website. Now, we're not going to have written monthly reports to the city. We have some monthly reports, but a lot of the reports were just verbal to the city manager, which was certainly contemplated by the agreement. We do have some written monthly reports, and we can certainly put those up on the website. As to changes to the plan, this will work in a kind of a version like any land use project, where if there are amendments to the approved site plan that was approved by the city manager, those amendments have to be submitted to the city manager. Now, if they're just like with any land use development, with a regular land use development, if it's a really minor, hey, we're going to move this parking spot over here, it doesn't really impact anything. Well, the planning director has the ability to grant that administratively. So if it's really minor, hey, we're going to move this parking space over there, that's within the city manager's delegated authority. If it's a really big change, like we're going to put another story on top of the school, or we're going to eliminate a building, or what have you, that's something that would be referred out by the city manager for comment and report back by the planning board, potentially by this committee, excuse me, depending if it's reconstituted. So it wasn't that specific in the referral back to give us that leeway, not knowing what committees would be in existence at the time. So certainly if there are big picture changes to the project, like are being proposed now, those would be presented to the public. But PHA would have to make a decision on what they want to do first, right? And obviously they're still in the working phase on trying to make those decisions, and that would be a conversation. It is a part of the ongoing conversation with the city manager and city staff. And as we're now into full swing, PHA has done a really nice job of including city staff in a lot of these discussions. So I hope that answers your questions.
And So the reason I was asking these questions is one of the sections in here says ground lease, as Mr. Welsh mentioned, this should be all finalized by, December 31st, 2027. So we're still looking at financing, we're still looking at changes. And then there is also, a clause in here that says, they can request an extension till 28. So from my perspective, I would like to know when, like Eric said, when are we gonna have shovels in the ground when, you know, we still have two balls in the air at least, for financing and now a change in scope or change in anything. So that's what that's where my questions are coming from. And it would be great just to have this available so we have an idea. The rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's
Sorry. That document is on the Sherburne page in the website. It's called the option to ground lease. 35 Sherburne.
Move we adjourn.
Any other public comment? Anybody else?
Ratings of brain informative.
Happy holidays.
All right. Thanks, everybody.